Hello, this is Michael Tracy, and this video is going to start to take a look at the Chinese expedition to Mount Everest in 1960 as part of a series of videos that will attempt to solve the greatest mystery in mountaineering history, whether the Chinese reached the actual summit in 1960. As a start, this video will look a little bit at the overlap between the 1960s Chinese expedition and the 1924 British expedition, as Xu Jing, one of the Chinese climbers, stated he saw a body in 1960 on the upper mountain. One interesting overlap is this photo of the Chinese climbing up to North Col. For the camps at North Col and below, the Chinese used the same camps as the British and followed the same route. What is interesting is the rope ladder shown in this photo was purchased by the Chinese at the Rongbuk Monastery, where it had been left by an earlier British expedition. While there were expeditions in 33, 35, 36, and 38 that all reached the North Col, Andrew Irvin was the one who made the rope ladder in 1924, and it would be interesting if the Chinese used Irvin's rope ladder to reach the North Col on their climb. And of course, there's the overlap that the Chinese used hobnail boots. But the main overlap between 1960 and 1924 is summit rocks. The Chinese claim to have collected summit rocks, but these rocks remain locked up in a Chinese archive. The issue with summit rocks in Mallory and Irvin was best explained by YouTuber Emp Lemon in a video that has received over 5 million views.
It's highly likely that if either of the two climbers reached the summit, they would have collected rock samples. The rocks found atop Everest are geologically unique to that part of the mountain. If Irvin were to be found with summit rocks, it would prove that one of the climbers had made it to the top of Everest. Curiously, the 1999 forensic search of Mallory's body neglected to check for summit rocks, so it remains unclear whether Mallory had any on his person.
And of course, there are the issues of cameras and photographs. Although there are numerous photos of the Chinese expedition lower on the mountain, the timing of the climbing on the upper mountain is difficult to piece together because of the vague and contradictory accounts. This not only applies to the 3 different official accounts of the summit push, but also to numerous conflicting accounts of how people got into position, when they got there, and how fast they climbed and descended. This video is only going to look at 2 of the official sources, and I will get into additional contradictions with the 3rd major published account in a future video. All the versions differ in major aspects, including who was initially on the summit push, what route they took, how they got into position, and whether an early reconnaissance had been performed. As you look into the Chinese 1960 expedition, the number of contradictions and nonsensical statements simply becomes overwhelming. In this video, I will not cover a significant number of serious problems with the various accounts, but I will instead focus on a more limited number using 2 official accounts and an interview with 2 of the climbers which took place in 2001. The 2 official accounts are the Alpine Journal publication, written by Shi Chen, who was the expedition leader in 1960, but not part of the actual summit team, and an account in Mountaineering in China, which was put out as the official publication of the People's Physical Culture Publishing House. Not only do these 2 publications contradict themselves, they are also contradicted by the unofficial accounts told by 2 expedition members, Wang-Fu Chao and Xu Jing, in interviews with Joachim Hemleb and Eric Simonson in 2001. The statements made in the interview contradict both published accounts, but I'll spend some time analyzing the details provided by Xu Jing, as he reported spotting a body on a descent from the assault camp at the base of the first step. In the official publications, Xu Jing never climbed up to the first step, and the Chinese never moved their assault camp up to the base of the first step either. So let me get into why this discrepancy is such a big deal. The official version is that 4 climbers, Wang-Fu Chao, Ku Ying Huang, Gang Bu, and Lu Liman, had left the assault camp at 8,500 meters at 9:30 a.m. May 24th. The Chinese use Peking or Beijing time, which is UTC plus 8, while Mallory and Irvin's time was UTC plus 6, so this would correspond to a 7:30 a.m. departure time on a summit bid, which should be the first indication that something is very wrong with their story, as there is no explanation for such a late departure. In an interview in 2001, Xu Jing contradicted the official publication by stating he was one of the first 4 members who headed out on the summit push, but that he started getting altitude sickness a short distance out and turned around. He returned to the assault camp, and Zhu Yinghua replaced him in the assault party and took a camera with him. Apparently, the original plan was not to carry any camera at all to the summit. The official account has them carrying other items, a rucksack, sleeping bags, ice axes, and breathing apparatuses. However, later when the Chinese claim Lu Liman bivouacked above the second step, the sleeping bags disappeared, with Lu Liman being warmed only by the thoughts of Chairman Mao, which worked very well as he had no frostbite despite allegedly spending the night in the open without oxygen above the second step. More problematic was the plan to film the summit party reaching the summit with the camera being positioned at the first step. You can't see the actual summit from the first step. You can't even see the false summit. Everything is blocked by the first step, and the camera team would have to traverse out onto the face just to get a shot of even the false summit. Exactly how they would know exactly what time to do that was never explained. So Xu Jing's version that they would leave their only camera with the group at the first step is a bit problematic because even if the weather was great, they could not photograph the actual summit from that location, nor anywhere near there. There is also this picture, which appears to be from a normal camera and not a still from the film camera. The Chinese claim it was taken from 8,700 meters, which places them well above the third step, the summit being 8,848 meters, and then claiming to have reached the summit in pure darkness. It's not clear why it would have taken them that many hours to descend 148 meters or 485 vertical feet. It is also not clear why they couldn't take the camera out earlier, as this photo was clearly not taken just as the sun was coming up. Xu Jing also stated that 9 people had come up in support of the 4 climbers, and all 13 spent the night before the assault party headed out the morning of the 24th. It was at that time that Xu Jing turned around and was replaced by Xu Jing, who was the cameraman, and apparently none of the other members knew how to work a camera. This left Xu Jing and 8 other people in the assault camp. Exactly how they fit that many people into the tents remains one of the great mysteries of Everest. Xu Jing's account also differs from the official narrative in that it had them move the high camp up to 8,530 meters at the base of the first step. And while there is an excellent location for an assault camp in that nook at the base of the first step, it is difficult to believe that 13 people spent the night there. Equally problematic is that Xu Jing was distressed and needed to descend, but of the 8 other people staying at high camp, none could be bothered to assist him on the way down. As their purpose for being there was ostensibly to film the summit, and the cameraman had just taken the only camera, it is not clear why they remained there. Xu Jing then descends to Camp 6, where he waits an additional day to head down, but it is on his descent from the first step to Chinese Camp 6 that he claims to have seen a body, and I will look at that shortly. For now, there are still the problems of why there was only one camera on the entire mountain, or even if Xu Jing had both a still camera and a film camera, why he was the only person that could take photographs between May 24th and May 25th. The morning of the 25th, Xu Jing shot a piece of film from above the second step. As you can see here, the sky is clear, and it is from later in the morning. It is photographing the snow slope where they had just claimed to have clumsily plotted down, and there are no visible tracks in the snow. In contrast, this is me in Jiangbu, fighting the crowds you've heard so much about, on our way up the snow slope, following the well-trodden path that is easily visible. While there were more people that summited that day, the lack of any clear tracks in the snow is a problem for the 1960 team, although they explain it as the film not being high enough resolution. As a note, I am at about 8,700 meters in that photo. More problematic is that same snow slope is visible from just about everywhere, and supposedly not a single Chinese camera was working that could photograph their descent, and not a single person reported seeing anyone crossing that snow slope. The other 8 people allegedly staying at high camp also just disappear, as the assault team did not meet up with any support climbers until they rejoined Xu Jing at North Col. So while Xu Jing experienced extreme mountain sickness on May 24th, he then decided to wait around at the camp at 8,130 meters for an extra night. However, the summit team had not returned by then, and he descended to North Col, citing a lack of food at Camp 6 and bad weather, with no explanation as to why these same problems would not be present when the assault team got back to Camp 6. In particular, why did Xu Jing stay in that camp and use the additional food and fuel when it would be needed by the summit party on their return? There's also an account from Wang Fu Chao that at some point they went over to Mallory and Irvin's Camp 6. There was no reason for anyone to go over there other than to investigate the camp. There were only 2 occasions the Chinese were above 8,000 meters, and it's not clear exactly who went over to the camp, nor what their reasons for doing so were. With the basic factual details about Xu Jing's movements confusing, we are left with his account that, when descending from the camp at the base of the first step, he took a non-standard route back and at some point saw a body, with him providing differing accounts of which altitude he saw the body at. He also could not properly identify the locations of various Chinese camps on the mountain when shown a photo of the north face. The interview was over 40 years after the 1960 expedition, so it is not surprising his memory was not entirely consistent, nor is it particularly critical that he could remember any of the details. From his account, he stated they started at the assault camp at the first step, and he was descending to Chinese Camp 6. From there are only a handful of routes he realistically could have taken, and some of them can easily be ruled out. For instance, he could not have seen the body on the modern route, nor on any of the routes climbed in 1933. While Jake Norton did search the Warts area in 2019, that is not a realistic route for Xu Jing to have taken. It is too far from a direct route, and it also requires Xu Jing to have climbed out of the easy-to-descend exit crack and attempt to cross extremely difficult terrain while he is in direct line of sight with his Camp 6. Removing the routes he would not have taken or could not have possibly seen a body on, there are only a handful of routes down, and they split up along this break in the yellow band, as it is a type of bottleneck. That is, there are only a couple ways to transition across that break, as it is on a ledge, so you would traverse over to the next easy spot rather than attempting some extremely difficult descent. The first route here is on the far right, which would require him to climb back away from the first step. I don't think that one is legitimate, as it would have him backtracking for no reason. The next rather obvious route down is the Norton-Somerville route. Once below the break, he could have taken a couple routes over to his Camp 6. But as you descend into the Mallory Basin, you would then have to ascend to get out of it back up to Chinese Camp 6. One question is whether he might have seen Mallory. Assuming he did see a body, it was probably not Mallory's, as that route would require a climb to get out of the basin, which would be easily avoided by going to the other side of the bulge, which I will refer to as the ill-defined rib. This photo is from George Mallory's body, looking back in the direction of Chinese Camp 6. So if he descended into the basin, he would have to climb back up that ill-defined rib seen in the photo, all of which would be visible to him from higher up the mountain. As Mallory's body was found at about the same altitude as Chinese Camp 6, he would also have to descend directly down to Mallory's body and then traverse over, with there being no reason for him to do so. The more obvious route is to traverse up higher and avoid the ill-defined rib altogether. Along that traverse, Irvin could be anywhere below the ice axe that is high in the Mallory Basin. That was the primary search area of Dave Hahn on a couple of search expeditions, and he never turned anything up. But the snow conditions for Dave Hahn were pretty poor. That area remains a perfectly viable location for Irvin's body. The next possibility is to stay on the ledge and traverse over to the 1933 high camp and then descend. That is the easiest route back, and provided the snow is low, you can see where your footholds are along that area of the ridge. That is one of the areas searched by Mark Sinnott in 2019, for which no photos or information is available. It might be possible to cut down a little prior to reaching the 1933 high camp, but there are no bodies in that region, and it is easily visible to climbers on the modern route, as it was for everybody in 1933. Xu Jing could also have traversed over higher up and joined this snow ledge, an area also searched by Mark Sinnott in 2019, for which no photos or information is available. It is along that ledge where I place the final resting place location. Ultimately, there are too many contradictions with Xu Jing's account to put much weight on his alleged sighting. If he did see a body, it tells us little more than that Irvin was located somewhere on the upper mountain. That area has been searched and photographed with drones. There were apparently 2 drones on the mountain in 2019, which was a very low snow year, and none of those photographs of this region have been released. Mark Sinnott climbed over to that region to search it directly, and no photos of that search have been released either. The problem is not vague statements from Chinese climbers. The problem is American climbers with their corporate backers refusing to release the information they have, while at the same time providing misinformation, changing the location of the oxygen bottles, stating they searched pockets for rocks when they were not even there the day Mallory was found, and doggedly insisting that Mallory and Irvin climbed the ridge route when the evidence is overwhelming that they did not. And of course, there is the final overlap between 1924 and 1960, in that the people who believe Mallory and Irvin did not make it in 1924 are the same ones pushing the narrative that the Chinese did in 1960.